Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Fly Fishing Insider Podcast. I'm Christian Bacasser, your host. Today, we have Stratton Hunter on the line. Stratton, you've been fishing since you've been about 10 years old, found your father's bamboo rods in the closet, wreaked havoc on those. I'm sure put a couple smiles and frowns on his face along the way. But man, you've been fishing a long time. And not only that, but you've been fishing out of Western North Carolina. That's your specialty area. You focus on a lot of the small stream trout and wild trout fisheries around there, which are incredible. I used to go down to the area for a lot of climbing and whatnot. The Pisgah National Forest, I recall being just a fantastic place. But you've also focused heavily on muskie. And that is, the fish of 1,000 casts, et cetera, a whole nother beast of itself. And we want to touch on that. But what I really want to focus on is the lifestyle that you've built over the past, I don't know, well, your lifetime, I guess I should say. And that is you've been able to travel the globe on 2 occasions and go to a bunch of different areas. And we're going to cover that subject. And I would say, those were 2 travel tours where fly fishing was DIY and secondary in nature. And I think that really fits in with a lot of us because we can't make a world tour of fly fishing happen. But we can make a vacation happen and we can make maybe a world tour happen, but it could have a little element of fly fishing. So I think that's really awesome that you were able to do that. We're going to get some tips and tricks from you there. And then we're going to wrap up the end of it with a location that I know you found that you would highly recommend for a DIY package if somebody was thinking of going to and exploring and having a good time traveling and fishing. So welcome to the show, Stratton. It's great to have you, man.
Thank you very much, Christian. Good morning to you, and it's a pleasure to be here. I've enjoyed your podcast, listening to them, and it's funny, as I listen to your podcast and some of the individuals that you've also had on the show, I've fished with.
Yeah.
So I feel like I'm in really good company. Actually, I'm in the shadows of most of these people, but it's fantastic being here. Thank you.
All right. Well, hey, shadows change throughout the day, my man. So, it's great. We're really happy that we've been able to get some good, unique individuals, I think, on the show. People that aren't just the mainstream media types, et cetera, which are fantastic anglers and have a wealth of knowledge, et cetera. But I really try to focus on bringing people in who are of all skill levels, but have something to offer the fly fishing community. So it's great to have you on. I know you're a complete and utter expert in the field of muskie for your area. I've seen the notes from your customers and et cetera. So that was certainly something that attracted me to get you on the call. I knew you were a core angler to the core. Per se. So let's do this real quick. You provide guide services, et cetera. I want to make sure people know how to get a hold of you because I think that's important. And one of the things I express here on the show, your website is wncfishhunter.com. And people can reach you there. There's an email contact, et cetera. Is there a phone number or any other way that you would recommend that people getting a hold of you there?
Yeah, absolutely, Christian. You can email me at wncfishhunter@gmail.com. And that's 2 H's, so FISHHUNTER. And I also have a cell that goes straight to me, 828-582-9547.
Okay, great. All right. So if people want to get a hold of you for either or, the trout or the muskie, that's a great way to go about that. Let's talk really quick about the muskie fishing in your area. And I think I'll touch on the trout fishing as well so people can get an understanding of that. And then we're going to dive into our main subject, and that's your travel, et cetera.
Yep, sounds good. So the muskie fishing in our area is primarily done in probably the biggest river in Western North Carolina, which is the French Broad River. And it is it's a cooler stream, which is nice, right? So we can fish it year round for muskie. We don't have to lay off in the hotter months, which we're approaching now, actually a little too quick, actually. But the upper end of the French Broad is based off of three smaller trout streams, the West Fork, North Fork, and East Fork, further south out of Rosman. And I say south because the French Broad actually runs north. It's an older stream. Some people say, or I've read, it's the third oldest stream in the world, right? We're around 250 million years old, which is kind of interesting. So there's a lot of history there, more than I could ever bother to discuss. But it has a indigenous strain of tiger muskie, which almost got wiped out with farming. And through assistance of the Western North Carolina Muskie Club, which I've been part of since the mid-'80s, and working with the Wildlife Resource Commission, we have started stocking muskie back in there on an annual basis around October. We'll get probably 8-10 boats out there, and we'll all catch about 55, 60 what I would call fingerling muskie, about 10 to 12 inches long, and release them in the skinnier sections of the stream where there's not many big predators to wipe them out.
Snack happers.
Exactly. So the muskie fishing here is good. To your point, fish at 10,000 casts. Some people say with a fly rod, you add another zero to it. It's hard. It'll wear on you, but boy, is the payoff big. I think a couple of muskie a year is the equivalent to a couple hundred beautiful trout a year. You got to put the time in. You have to want it. You have to earn it, and you got to stay on your game. Make every cast count, and just make your lure or your fly work for you, whatever your deal is. We throw flies most of the time here, big Buford heads, undulated. We throw a 400 grain sinking line to make sure we get it down the water column quick. We have a bunch of submerged trees all through this river, so you really have to get the stripping done pretty quick, or you're going to spend a lot of your time on the bottom of the river in snags. But that said, that's where all the fish are.
So you're fishing from a boat, primarily looking at those ambush areas, wherever it is. Is it a river shoal, a drop off on the edge, and then, like you said, casting in front probably of a tree or something, trying to drag it out quick, so you don't get that snag and get them to either come off the front end or the back end in that nature.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I suspect you've done your share of chucking big old half chickens at these fish as well. So they always sit in slow areas, right? Eddies, almost pond-like sections of the river. Because when you look at the DNA of the fish, the way it's made up, that dorsal fin sits way in the back by the tail. They're just not made to hang out in a current. They want to sit in the bottom. They want easy. A lot of people equate them to like a lion in a safari. There's plenty of food to eat. They just pick their moment to pounce, and then they'll go right back under the stump or under the tree and sit the rest of the day. So a lot of, I hate to say it, a lot of luck is involved in it, but it's really knowing where those fish are. And when you know where they are, you put a little extra time on that spot when you're targeting them.
Right. Yeah, it always seems to me with muskie, it's first and foremost is understanding where they're at. Second is putting the fly in front of them. And third is, in probably the largest portion, is are they ready to eat? Because sometimes they just may have eaten and they're, like you said, going to hang out. They don't really care.
That's right. That's right. And then the place to really look for them when you get that cast going is within feet of the bank when that fly hits the water, first strip, and then boat side, because as you're well aware, they are notorious about following stuff in, and so you're always watching 5 feet behind. And I always tell my clients, at a minimum, just give me a circle. But I really want a figure eight. I actually want 2 of them. And then some of the mistakes that individuals make is they'll start to make the figure eight, and they're already looking downstream where they want to cast again. And they'll miss the fish that will roll up and take a look at it, and they'll pull the fly out of the water. And I'm immediately put the fly back down. She's right there. And they're like, where? They trust me. She's right there. But, rarely will they come back after you pull it out.
It's funny you say that because I originally started fishing for them with crankbaits. And I loved your description of as soon as your fly hits the water, because the guy I fished with was a pike and muskie guy out of Wisconsin. And he preached to me nonstop. When your crankbait or your rooster hits the water, it better be coming back to the boat.
Yeah.
It needs to hit the water coming to you. And I can't tell you how many times you would get eats right as it would hit the water. It's that splash, it's that whatever it is, and the dragon would come out and boom, just smash it. And then your other element, it's so true with muskie. I mean, it's like we repeat ourselves, right? The figure eight. I mean, I don't know how many times somebody said that, but you're absolutely right. You get to the boat and you do your figure eights, and you got to look. You got to pick a radius, right? I think one of the mistakes that I made often was I was always looking at my bait as I was figure eighting, and I wasn't looking off into the shadows per se, because they'll lurk. And it's like, oh, I did 2 figure eights. That was my number. Now I come into the boat, but it's look at your shadow. I do 2 figure eights. And if I see something, I just keep going.
That's right.
So let me ask you this. There are some key components to having a rod that's the right rod for muskie fishing. One, you're throwing big flies, and 2, that figure eight, being able to have a stiff enough tip to manage your rod in that short distance, etc. What kind of setup do you really like to run with that? I know you said you like to run a sinking line, etc. You probably run a shorter leader, heavier leader, etc. But I'd love to hear your description.
Yeah, so I run 2 primary rods. I have a 9-foot Sage. It's an old VPS, but she is stiff and she throws the fly really well. Kind of a bit of a funny story on it. I'll keep it short. I've broken that rod so many times that Sage wants to give me the middle fin, so to speak, right? and they're starting to charge me more money to get it repaired.
Right.
All right. And this last time, I only broke like 2 inches off, and I was like, okay, no, I'll fix it myself. And so now I'm going to like I guess 8-foot 10-inch Sage VPS, and it casts better. It is that much stiffer, and I enjoy it so much better. But anyhow, yeah, I run the old Sage. I run a Winston 10 weight. The Sage is a 9. I run probably like a 5-foot 65-pound braid off the sinking 400 grain, and then I tie my own wires, my own wire leaders, and they're about 10 to 12 inches long. And as soon as I get a kink in them, I cut them off and I replace them. I don't fool around, because it's too darn hard to get one of those girls on, to have something fail that could have been easily fixed.
Yep. And on your wire, do you use a swivel and then a clip?
I do.
Yep. Okay.
I do. Sure do.
Right. Cool. Yeah, I love the description of the rod too, because I fish an 8-weight moonshine rod. They're Vesper, and they'll send you an extra tip with your rod, so you get two sections. And I was down in Louisiana fishing for reds, and we're like pounding the pups and stuff, and it was super fun. And I ended up breaking the tip of one, and I kept it. And I like the shorter tip too when I want a little bit of a stiffer rod, heavier wind days and things like that. It's really funny. It fish is different, and I broke it down to the next eyelet, and so I just cut it off and said, let's deal with it. So yeah, it's kind of funny scenario.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
Anglers are innovators as well, right?
Yeah, you have to be.
We're about 15 minutes in here. Let's dive into your travels. You did 2 tours specifically that were pretty lengthy. Kind of give us a description on how those came about and then what you did.
Yeah, appreciate that. So 2011, my wife and I had been married for a couple of years, and we just decided to get a wild hair and sell everything, put leftover stuff in storage, bought a couple of backpacks, and took off around the world for a full year. And we hit 19 countries. And, one of the primary things that I took, of course, was a fly rod. So I didn't know really what to take, so I just took a 5-weight, considering the areas that we were going into. I knew like New Zealand, Australia, and a couple of cool places like that, the UK. And took a 5-weight rod in with a floating line, and just just gave it hell all over the place wherever I could, and it was fantastic. I was able to fish rivers and creeks all DIY because you're doing this on an extreme budget. We're staying in hostels. Like I said, we have backpacks on. We're not exactly doing the ramen noodle things like in school, but we're eating very small amounts of food and just kind of just making sure we can stay on the trail as long as we can. And just taking a rod around, you meet a lot of other like-minded people, other people who haven't seen a fly rod, and just had a heck of a time. Can you imagine like walking through New Zealand, both North Island and South Island, at a whim, doing your own thing? It was a lovely experience.
That's cool. That's cool. So you spent most of the time in Europe, and then you said the New Zealand area. Where else were you at?
Yeah, so we started in the Cook Islands in the South Pacific, which is owned by New Zealand. So we went to Cooks, New Zealand, Australia, hopped into Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, and then from there into India, and then from India into Europe for the last 3 months of the program.
Yeah.
And so I threw flies almost everywhere. And kind of a funny story, I was throwing a fly in Laos in the Nam Song River. And there's not a damn fish in that stream, brother. They can't spell conservation, but God bless them. They're just trying to feed themselves.
Yeah.
And so I was in there throwing a fly. I didn't get anything. And one of the villagers came up and had a throw net. And so I talked him into showing me how to use it.
Yeah.
And so I threw that for a little while. And then the next day he brought it to where we were staying and he asked me to go out and fish with it. And so I was out there for half a day, didn't catch a single fish. I'm not really proficient at the throw net, but
yeah, right.
I was giving it hell. And so I'm walking back into this little village, and this little girl walks up to me and she pulls the bucket over to look in it and saw there was nothing in it, fell on her back, holding her stomach, and horse laughed me. She could not believe it. She was so shocked that I didn't have a single fish. And it was the funniest thing she'd ever seen in her life. And after a while, I'm laughing too, but I didn't see that coming.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
What was maybe another really unique area that you didn't expect to maybe fish in, but when you got there or when you got in the water, you're like, wow, this is pretty amazing.
Yeah. So Argentina, actually that's the only place that I grabbed a guide because I needed someone with a boat. So north of Buenos Aires, in a little town called Corrientes on the Parana River, is loaded with golden dorado, and that was actually a destination town for that reason. And it still wasn't much money. And this guy put us up in his house, and he took me out for 2 days, and throwing pretty good sized flies, 5-6 inch streamers, and put 10 in the boat over the course of 2 days, with the biggest one not being near as big as they come, but probably 24, 25 inches long, coming in about 8-9 pounds.
Yeah. Wow.
Right. So a hard hitting fish, jump like crazy. And of course we let everything go. So that was pretty great. Then
was that on your first tour?
Yeah. That was the first tour. And then from there we hopped up into Bolivia and we hiked the Colca Canyon, which is like one of the deepest canyons in the world. It's pretty amazing. It's not Grand Canyon style, but it's pretty, breathtaking. And we got down in there, and there's a whole run of rainbow trout down in there. I didn't see that coming.
Wow.
And we fished that pretty good and caught fish almost every single day in there.
Wow.
So that was nice. Cool. Yeah. And then the second trip, I took a 9-weight because we were hitting some of the bigger water areas. And this was 10 years later, because that first trip we thought, man, this is so cool. We got to do it again. Yep. So 10 years is up, sold everything again, started from scratch again, dusted off the backpacks and took off. And this time we were fishing mostly flats and saltwater areas. And man, just had a field day with some nice fish. I caught my best bone, which isn't a monster, but probably is like 7.5 pounds, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
And this was one of those times where, I was scouting. It took me 3 days to find it or find them. And then I went back had found a pair the day before, targeted, caught it that morning, and then there's a local villager just begging me for the fish. I felt so bad because I just wasn't going to give it to him. And it's one of those weird situations you don't think you're ever going to be faced with. And so I let it go, and I just apologized to him. He didn't get it. I ended up going home, getting some money, going back to his village and giving him some money, and trying to explain to him the basic economics of it. Right? If more fishermen come, your town's going to do better. And
Yeah.
I don't think it sunk in, but
Hey,
I gave him
that's
some
a
money.
hard discussion.
Yeah, dude, it's extremely hard. So
Yeah, a very, very hard discussion. And I mean, kudos to you for, in my opinion, picking the route that you did, because it is a long-term, more sustainable scenario in my personal opinion. But that is a very difficult decision to
yeah,
make.
it is.
It had to be gut-wrenching for you.
It was extremely hard. I mean, I swear to you, Christian, he was like this, wanting it. And I was like, I can't do it. I don't know, right or wrong. It's still, obviously, it's with me today,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So the best I could come up with is just give him some money, and that's what I did.
Yeah.
But there's so much fishing out there to be had from a DIY perspective that anybody can do it. It's just a matter of a little bit of sacrifice, right? Because you're walking away from a career, your job, your house, and you're just putting everything on the market, and you're just going out and doing the best you can. We were down in Sri Lanka the last time, and this is actually pretty cool. We were down on the coast. It was extremely hot, like 103, 104 degrees. The sand would burn your feet at midday. So you had to go out in the mornings or late in the afternoon, early evening. And we were sitting under the patio, or not patio, it's more of a sunscreen thing on a picnic table. And you could see fish rolling up right off the coast. And what it was little tuna. And so I grabbed a 9-weight and I grabbed a surfboard and I pinned the reel and rod under my chest and swam out to them. And I was trying to find them. And before I knew it, there's like 3 guys, locals on the beach, giving me directives on what way to
where
go.
They're at. Yeah.
So it turned into this community effort.
Right. Because they're thinking lunch.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so I went out there, and the problem I had is popping up on the surfboard and then stripping out enough line to get a cast off. They were gone. Right. So what I ended up doing is stripping off like 70 feet, pretty much on my fly line, pin the rod under me perpendicular, and then I'd start kind of paddling out, and they'd point, and I'd try to circle the school with a fluorescent streamer like 2 inches long. Yeah, I'd wait to feel something and keep my rod from getting jerked off. That's right. And set. And I ended up catching 2 that way. And in this scenario, I did give them to the guys on the beach.
Yeah. Tuna is a little different, right?
100% different. So that worked out really
awesome.
Well.
Yeah, surf trolling with Stratton
exactly
Hunter. There you go.
That's right. Bring your sunscreen.
Right. The motor is limited.
100% limited.
Right. That is cool. So you traveled all around. You got, this great experience, et cetera. There's got to be some commonalities to the DIY thing. Like after your first tour, or halfway through your first tour, you probably knew, like, okay, when I go to a new destination, these are the things I look for and do to set myself up for success. Can you kind of talk us through that?
Yeah, 100% I can. So when you're dependent on DIY to catch fish, especially in areas which you are not familiar with, it's maps, right? It's talking to kids. Mm-hmm. Kids know everything. It's that younger generation.
They're explorers, right? They're natural explorers.
Yeah, 100%. They will point out anything, and they don't mind telling you, which is kind of a brilliant. You talk to people like us, old dogs, like, I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah.
No muskie around here.
That's right. So we start hitting maps, water temperatures, going to fish markets, seeing what they're serving up there, what they're selling, and just going to basic just estuaries around the area and start working them, and kind of trial and error and figuring it out. But that has translated greatly up here to my neck of the woods. Great example. About 2 weeks ago, we had a huge storm come through here, and it washed everything out. So we went up to our higher elevations, around 5,000, 5,500 feet, chasing our little native brook trout or speck, whatever you want to call it. And I wanted to find some new streams. So I got online, started researching. I'm still, I'll do digital, but I also have the big, the Rand McNally Atlas, right? It's the size of a coffee table.
Yeah.
And I pulled that out, and you start looking at different stream structures. I found 3 new streams. And I was on them again for the second time on Sunday, hitting them hard. And they're loaded with brookies, and it's just wonderful. And so it's just, you start thinking about, where are brookies? They're at higher elevation. They want clean streams. They want cooler temperatures. That's a heck of a filter to work with right away.
Yes.
So to me, it tells me in my neck of the woods, start looking around the parkway, right? That's a high ridge line, and it goes across all that beautiful scenic area. So start there. From there, you start finding the streams, and then you start researching each trib that goes into it, and then how do you get to it? A shameless plug for what's that app? Was it
Onyx?
All Trails.
All Trails, yeah.
Yeah.
Trout Routes is another one. I've used Trout Routes. It's amazing.
I'm gonna write that down. I've heard of it. Yeah. So you start using stuff like that. You have all these tools at your disposal, and but then you still have to get in and see if it's fishable or if it's fishy, and and just give it your best shot and hope for the best and continue on the good path.
Yeah. Now that's a lot of the trout scenarios. When you get into the flat scenario, it's a whole nother game.
Yeah, 100% another game.
I think the fish market, the kids, the locals, the maps can be key, because you can find where the flats are, especially digital maps these days. But talk a little bit about how you worked with tides and some of those scenarios, maybe understanding, the growth, the plant growth and whatnot, and how that helped you, because those are big elements in saltwater fishing.
Huge element. So tide charts can be found for any body of water anywhere in the world, right? So you start watching the tide chart. I follow Sol Lunar as well. I don't think it's top line concern, but I think it makes a difference, right? I think
it's
it
like
makes a difference.
confident flies for me.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, hey, if I could put something in there where I'm feeling like, yeah, it's it, man. I'm on the lunar cycle.
Yeah.
Why not? I don't know if it's placebo effect or not. I mean, people live and die by it. I am like, hey, I'll give it credo and use it as a confidence element.
Yeah. Just like taking it from a muskie example, there's definitely a hierarchy on alignment, right? What needs to take place.
Right.
And first is weather. I want that crappy rainy day, overcast.
Which is so funny, because it's the opposite of trout, right? Trout, you want the overcast and maybe a little drizzle, enough to give you a good hatch, and but on salt, you're like, hey man, I want crystal clear. I want to be able to see hot sun, Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. You have to have the sun. You want to find those shadows. Otherwise, you'll struggle to find the fish unless it's tailing. So weather is the first one. Water conditions is the second one. Sort of like I was saying earlier in this podcast, a lot of rain will ruin a river here. A lot of rain will cause bad tides and bad waves in the flats, right? But once those two things are ironed out, and then back to the Sol Lunar and the confidence fly, that's really what I need to have to get going. Now, that said, I just soon skip a meal and fish anyhow, right? Because I'll always fish regardless. But it's nice to have the confidence that there is an alignment in the stars. no pun intended there, that you want to get out there and give it your best.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think, when I DIY, it's any species goes, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah,
I'm usually fishing something a little smaller that's got a little action to it. My primary is a gotcha.
yep,
I fish a
sure.
gotcha. It's got some weight to it. I know it's going to get down, but I can also almost tight line it with a really high rod and keep it up if I need to,
Hmm.
for something like a floating trigger or something like that.
Yeah,
But being able to be a little more universal in nature, because you got one rod, you got one opportunity scenario of like, it's a lot more, in my opinion, of a surprise element when you're DIY. I think
yeah,
when you go out with a guide, it's like, okay, we're looking for bones. They know
hmm,
where they're at. Your
yeah,
propensity to come upon them is pretty high, so you're set up for a bonefish.
yeah,
When you're DIY, it's like it could be anything.
hmm,
So I run a little bit heavier, tippet. You know, um, I'm always looking for any kind of shadow. What could that be? And even if I don't know
sure.
what it is, I'm casting to it. You know,
Yeah, yeah,
so I love that kind of hunting mentality of it, where you're just sneaking around and you're in a new place. So, you have any stories for us where maybe you had some success or failures, and
yeah,
you could
yeah,
describe that?
yeah, absolutely. Couple of different things come to mind. Uh, there's a great DIY place I've sorted out that has all the good flats fish that you would ever want. Your bones, permit, tarpon, and even the snook shows up for a nice afternoon meal. And it's in Utila, Honduras, which is a secondary island off of Roatan. It's a sleepy island. It doesn't get the deserved respects, in my opinion, and it's probably because they have these little hard biting flies, and you have to coat yourself in oil so that you drown on your body. That's really kind of the program there.
Mm,
But there are good tides, good dependable bonefish that come in, good estuaries on the backside that you can kayak across. You can rent a kayak for like $3 or $4, and through those little estuary, those ponds, if you will, it's full of snook and full of tarpon. And then you get through the mangroves on the backhand side, you're going to find another monster flat with bones and permit. And so
mm,
you have everything you possibly want right there, and you're all on your own. It's been a minute since I was there, but there was one other fly fisherman, and I didn't even see him on the backside. So I had it all to myself,
wow.
and there's just nothing better than that. So
And what are the tides like there? Are they a
they're not
pretty
big.
small swing, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. You immediately get online, you sort out when they're, when it's full pull, when it start coming in after flat, and it may come in a couple of feet, and
Okay.
it's a skinny tide.
Pretty subtle. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. But you're out there, you're looking for the puffs, right?
Right.
You're looking for the little holes in the mud.
So puffs. For those of you that maybe haven't had a ton of experience with saltwater fishing, a puff is essentially where a fish, primarily bonefish, are feeding on the critters that are down in the mud. So
Exactly right.
they create a mud puff, and you can actually blind cast into those and pull fish out pretty effectively. Actually, really
100%.
effectively.
Yep.
Um, but that's a typical sign of either fish being there or being there recently. So you use those as cues to target maybe moving fish or small pods, etc.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you never know what's going to show up. Um, I like to target stingrays. Um, Bones tend to follow off a ray to see what gets
Yep.
stirred up.
Yep.
I've seen snook do that as well.
Yeah. Permit. I've seen permit.
Yeah,
Following
yeah,
rays.
sure,
Big
sure.
one.
Yeah, that's always good. Um, we were in the same area, and I was targeting. There's like 3 or 4 bones that had come in. But then over on my right was a boxfish, kind of to your point earlier of kind of
Oh
changing
wow.
it up. It was straight upside down, tail up. You knew exactly what it was with that goofy tail and this kind of awkward looking body. I turned all my attention on it, and I'm just dropping shrimp right on it, and it ate. It was a great fight. It wasn't a crazy runner like a bone by any stretch,
Yeah.
but it was wonderful. And that's the stuff you get when you're on your own sorting it out.
Yeah. Yeah. It is interesting because I've been in scenarios where I've been permit fishing and you see like really nice trigger and you're like, oh, you just let it go, because you're on a
Yeah.
boat and you're hunting permit. And I've been on the opposite end where you're like, what the heck is that? You catch some odd species. I don't even know what it is. And I'm like, and that was fun. It's like you're a kid again. So
Yeah.
fishing has, all those elements. That's one of the things I really love about it.
Yeah, that's right. Something else I will do is I'll grab a streamer about this long, that'd be about 4 or 5 inches long, with a wire. Orvis makes some really good fly fishing wires, and I'll target barracuda when they come in to eat other fish, and that's a blast.
Oh yeah, they're leapers.
They are big leapers, and they are so fast. I because of a good hookup I had on a barracuda, I will never use a nail knot in the salt water again. it ripped it right off.
Yeah, they're ferocious. I mean, how fast they are, like you said. I mean, they'll just chop something in half. It's wild.
Yeah.
So you had let's hear this story. You had a take and a break of some sort?
Yeah. So we were fishing in an area that had a lot of bonefish, and we call it the bonefish pond because there's always a half a dozen or more sitting around in the bottom. And I had that barracuda fly in my bag, and this big barracudas came in and just sat and ran all the bonefish off. And it gave me time to cut, retie. Actually, I cut pretty far up to get to my thicker part of the leader, more of the butt section. Put it in. It nailed it on the first strip and took off. And I was trying to get the line on the reel. And when the second it hit the reel, and there was a little bit of a catch in it, I had sand. It didn't break the line, but that line pulled right off the fly line.
Yeah, just stripped the nail knot.
Stripped it right off. And then it caused me, that day, I was like, well, it's got to be a better knot. The name of it eludes me now, but you fold your fly line into a loop, and then you wrap it down, back up, and then back through again. Do you know what that knot's called?
So you fold your fly line, you're creating a loop-the-loop scenario, or are you actually tying in through the loop? Oh,
yeah.
I know what you mean.
You're getting a fly line, you're doing this, right? So
yeah.
In your fly line now is here, your tag end would be here. You run your leader through this side out, wrap 10 up, and then 10 back, and then back out the same way it came in and cinch it. So then that becomes tight, if you can see that.
Yeah. It's called
so it's not that flat. Yeah.
I can't remember what it's called. It's going to drive me nuts.
I can't either.
But it is. That's a kind of knot I use on my saltwaters unless I use a loop-to-loop.
Is it an improved Albright?
It might be, yeah. We'll take a look. Maybe I'll look it up and I'll include it in the notes.
Okay, sounds good. Good.
But yeah, it is important to have a good knot on a saltwater scenario. The other thing that I've learned over the years, and it was Keith Rosinus that was on the show. If you're not familiar with Keith is he's the Seychelles guy. I mean, you want to learn about the Seychelles, that's the guy. He basically developed the area as far as I understand it. One of the early shows that I did, if you look it up, I don't know what the episode number is, but it's worth a listen. I've had people comment, I've learned more on that show than I did going to the Seychelles twice. So we talk about multiple species and he gets into hyper detail on them. But one of the things that he taught me was that initial inertia, just exactly what you spoke to. And he said he'll turn his drag down because if you don't, that initial inertia can just blow up rods, it can blow up lines, et cetera, et cetera. So he'll get them on the reel, and then he'll start to slowly crank down the drag. And it comes with experience, learning how much for each species and et cetera. And the same thing, as line gets off the reel, he continues to crank because the size of the arbor changes, right? The
Sure. Yeah.
circumference of the arbor is now changing because you're stripping line off. So you had I don't know, whatever size arbor, you just took an inch off of that because you let out how much line. So I thought that was a really interesting concept.
Wow, that makes complete sense. And, it's just a testament that you never quit learning, right? I just now learned something from you, and I've been fishing for a long time.
Yeah.
It's so, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Note taken.
Yeah, really cool. He's I would highly recommend listening to that show. It's a good one. Good one.
Yeah, certainly will. Certainly will.
So let's do this. You had your 9-weight. Kind of talk through what your setup was for your DIY. Like, hey, I thought this was a good all arounder for flats. I love a 9-weight. I think it's a great rod. You can cast in high wind. It can handle permit and big fish. You got enough backbone. But it also still leaves it exciting for smaller bonefish, et cetera, as well. So
yeah, that's right. So when I traveled with the 9-weight, I took an extra spool, so I had a sinking line as well as a floating line, so I could work some of the deeper channels when I really wasn't sure what was out and about. I could just kind of blind cast around and sort it out. I took a handful of tapered leaders, even though I find myself not fishing with those much anymore. And I think it's probably because of that last trip, because there's a cost, right, to tapered leaders, and they're not cheap. So I bought some line on the way out, like a spool of 20-pound test, straight up 20-pound, and then a 10-pound. And then I just do a nail knot, actually not a nail knot for that. Excuse me, I didn't even say nail knot. Not a surgeon's, but a blood knot. Yeah, thank you. I do a blood knot to connect those two together, and I just started throwing that. And that seemed to work really well. And then I could shorten my leader or lengthen it depending on what I was chasing. You get out in the flats for those bones and the permit, you want to go with a 12, 14-foot complete leader setup. When you start messing around with tarpon, honestly, 5 feet is fine. And then I'd run a 40, 20, 40, right?
Yeah, so you have a bite leader.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. And I took a handful of flies for all occasions, enough I could put in a box this big, just crammed on top of each other, both sides. Because I tell you, it's hard to find good flies when you're traveling. Almost impossible. So
here's another tip for you: when you do that crammed small box, for DIY I like that, right? Because I'm like, okay, I'm going out. I don't want to carry a bunch of stuff if I don't have to. What I do is I take a large safety pin, and I'll put the fly on the safety pin when I'm done to dry, and have it clipped to my shirt. Because that saltwater, as you know, especially on an extended trip like this, it'll eat hooks alive, and so that's a great way to just, by the end of the day, you get back, your flies are dry, you knew what you were using and what you weren't using. It gives you a couple clues as to what was happening throughout the day, and then cram them all back in the box, but you're not putting a wet box away.
Oh,
so that's
love
a little
it, man.
tip that I found along the way too.
Yeah, that's a great tip, because what I was doing is cramming them back in, trying to remember. You can kind of look at it to see the ones that are all soaking wet, and try to pull them out. Then you got to pull out the neighboring flies around it, and they all get a rinse. And then the stuff you're rinsing them in, that's questionable water,
right.
So no, love that. Good call, Christian.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I'll tell you, man, Stratton, it has been great having you on the show. Let's give everybody your contact information again, because I know there's some people that are really interested in that Western North Carolina water. There's some unique experiences available out there in the Appalachian, and fire away there, my man.
Yeah, absolutely, and much appreciated. So it's WNCFishHunter.com, and again, it's 2 H's, Fish Hunter. And the name of the company is kind of a play off my name, Stratton Hunter. And the email address is wncfishhunter@gmail.com. And my direct cell is 828-582-9547. So feel free to reach out. You can text me if you like. You can go straight to the website. There's a contact link there as well. Even if you just have questions, I'm more than happy to answer and assist. I like to get people out fly fishing. One thing I do, I think is kind of unique, is individuals who are rather new to the sport. If I have the time and they have the time, I'll take them out into a field, either in my yard, I have a pretty good sized yard, or at a local park, and we'll work on casting for an hour, hour and a half. No charge, it's kind of part of the program. I think it'd be better for someone to get line control down before you get on the water. It goes a long ways.
You said line control. Talk a little bit about that before we break, because I think that is really important in the muskie world.
Boy, is it. Everybody spends, not everybody, but a lot of people spend good amount of money on a fly rod. Let that rod go to work for you. Learn how the rod loads. Learn how to keep the line in the air, and when it gets behind you, don't pull it back up too fast. Learn how to mend both upstream and downstream. There's just so many aspects of line control, whether it's on the delivery or on the drift. You really have to work that line, especially in a muskie situation where you're throwing out a big sinking line and the line's bellowing out. You got to make sure you understand where that fly is and the timing it takes for that fly to get to the right part of the water column in that small segmented pull right on the edge of a fast stream, right?
Yeah.
So at every turn, line control or line maintenance is critical.
Yeah, and I would recommend looking up the term aerial mend. You spoke to that, whether the mending is on the water or before. And a big part of throwing a sinking line, especially, is an aerial mend. Because once it hits the water, you only have a very short window to mend. And it's not nearly as effective as a floating line. So being able to incorporate an aerial mend is really something that can help you quite a bit.
100%. Yeah, well said. There's no upstream mend with a big 400 grain sinking line. Yeah, that ship has sailed.
Right,
so.
Right. Well, hey, man, I appreciate you being on the show. It's been good having you. If you guys want to get a hold of Stratton, he mentioned a couple places. The place I got in contact with you was LinkedIn. So if you're a professional and you're looking to get out or just learn and stay in contact with Stratton, you can also connect with him on LinkedIn as well. And we'll talk to you soon. Any chances you have some gumption to sell everything and go on another world tour here soon, or is that ship sailed itself?
I think that ship sailed, even though we are talking about a next trip being around North America. Maybe not sell quite everything, but just enough to where we could buy an RV and cruise around the States, go up to Canada, run around, see what we can stir up.
Well, you got a place to stay in Park City, man. You just give me a call.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it.
You got it. All right, everyone. That's it for this show. We'll see you next week. Stratton, thanks again. Talk to you soon.
Christian, take care, my man.